everyone. Welcome to our Commerce IQ live stream, where every week we have a different topic we talk for, maybe 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes. And this week we have a new topic for you, and of course it's about Prime Day. Prime Day is just under 2 weeks away. This year it'll be from July 12th through July 13th. And there's a lot of interesting things about this Prime Day that I want to talk about, a lot of great data that we have at Commerce IQ. If you have questions, please leave them in the comment box, and we will get to them. And I can also answer them after the presentation as well. But without further ado, let's get into it. So a lot of things to talk about today. And let's first start with a bit of a level setting and agenda. So first off, what's unique about Prime Day 2022? Again, we're almost 2 weeks out. There's a lot of things unique about this year. Well, let's review quickly, years past, right? The most recent 2 years, which we'll be looking at extensively as kind of a guideline for this coming year, right? So 2020 and 2021. Those years were unique on their own, right? 2020, you had the pandemic. 2021, you had ongoing supply chain issues, the beginnings of, perhaps some price increases as well. Lots of unique factors going into those. And 2022 is no different, all right? So we have ongoing inflation and rising costs that has really started to pressure margins. We're having shoppers shift from purchasing discretionary items, which were very popular, say last year when shoppers were more willing to stay home. Now they're focused more on purchasing experiences and essentials, so that can prove to be a headwind for Prime Day this year. They're also shopping more in store than they have been at any point in the past 2 years, because finally they feel entirely safe to do so, and that's also caused some headwinds for e-commerce in general. In some recent months, we've seen that e-commerce growth has stalled, though I believe that is, temporary, as it's more of a one-time shift to stores that we're seeing. Discount fatigue. Shoppers are, and this is not just in general for shopping, but especially for e-commerce, shoppers are kind of tired of, I think, the pricing games that can be played, that they feel are being played. And they're tired of, perhaps searching for the best deal or even trusting that it is the best deal. And I think that plays into Prime Day, as we'll see in a few slides. And then finally, Amazon, the kind of rumors swirling right now that Amazon is actually maybe saying we'll have a second Prime Day in October. So maybe this isn't for the first time. Perhaps this could not be the only Prime Day we see this year. And these are all very interesting factors that we wanted to examine. So we've kind of divided up the rest of this presentation that you'll listen to for the next several minutes into these 4 areas: supply chain, performance lift, discounting, and retail media. And we've really dug into our own data that we have at Commerce IQ. And of course, Commerce IQ is a retail e-commerce management platform that really helps to optimize and integrate your entire business across Amazon and other e-commerce platforms and retailers to enable you to do the best, to maximize your profits and revenue, and also cut down on the time invested needed to achieve those goals, because so much of it can be automated with our platform. But as a result, we have access to our own customers who do work on Amazon, and we can aggregate that data to get at a sense of what has happened in Prime Days past and what might happen in a couple weeks in Prime Day 2022. So let's get into our data and let's take a look at what we actually see happening, and we'll round out the discussion at the end with a look at our predictions for 2022 and brand guidelines. So first off, let's take a look at supply chain, right? And you'll see that a lot of this data takes the form of these 2 types of charts, and that is looking at right in the middle there along the horizontal axis. You have Prime Day 1 and Prime Day 2, because for the past several years it's really been over 2 days. And then, negative 15 through positive 15 on that horizontal axis. And that is just a measure of days. So you're looking at 15 days before, up to 15 days before Prime Day and up to 15 days after Prime Day, to get a sense of not just what happened on Prime Day, but what's the baseline level you can compare that to around Prime Day, around that same time that year. And we see that when we look at some supply chain metrics, specifically revenue lost due to out of stock. 2020 was a horrible year. You had out of stocks rising dramatically for Prime Day. I don't think brands or retailers, perhaps through no fault of their own, were really equipped to deal with just all the unexpected uncertainties and be able to deal with that surge in e-commerce pricing that occurred over Prime Day, to the point where you had revenue lost due to out of stock surging 400%, for instance. Or 300%, 4x. for 2020. By 2021, a lot of those issues were resolved, right? You see, you take a look at that graph on the left, see a much smaller bump for 2021 versus 2020. So good news is that for the most recent year, supply chain issues were largely resolved. And you take a look, maybe as a bellwether for this current year, where did supply chain issues remain? Where were brands still losing money on out of stocks? You can see that it was basically, concentrated around durable goods, right? So you have a big, if you sell into the patio, lawn, and garden categories, that was still a big area where a lot of money was lost due to out of stocks. And then to some extent, you had that around beauty and around home and kitchen as well as office products. But all the other, consumables categories, grocery, health and personal care, pet, they didn't really see a rise in out of stocks last year. So the question is, does that hold true this year? And I would say we might be due for a bit of a halfway rebound, okay, where you might see supply chain issues worsen compared to last year, but not be quite as bad as it was in 2020. And the reason I say this was when you look at our data for this year or for recent months, this past month in May, the most recent month we have full month data for, we saw a big spike in out of stocks, right? A big spike in both replenishable out of stocks, which is basically out of stocks on a unit basis, and revenue lost due to out of stocks on a dollar volume basis. Big spike in May. You had, levels, for instance, revenue lost due to out of stock rising 40% year over year. Versus May of 2022 versus May of 2021, a rise of 40% in revenue lost. And it's worth noting that there typically is a spike in out of stocks around May in recent years because it's kind of a spike ahead of the key summer selling period. But this spike far outpaces what we saw last year. And if that holds true, that means that this year could be difficult for out of stocks for Prime Day as well, given how close we are to it heading into, in the midst of summer. So why is that? Why could we be headed for a lot of out of stock problems? Well, really, there hasn't been a breather hardly in the supply chain issues that have been, faced recently. I mean, you have lockdowns in China due to their zero COVID policy, which has delayed manufacturing and shipping and global shipping. You have the Ukraine war, which is raising the cost of commodities and disrupting all sorts of supply chains for key products, both in Ukraine and in Russia, when you think of the sanctions placed on Russia. You have high demand, which is persisting because shoppers are, they're worried about rising prices, but still shoppers have a disproportionately high amount of savings right now because of stimulus spending in the past. And because of, especially, if you didn't lose your job and if you could work from home and you weren't necessarily spending on experiences, you may have saved some money as well. So shoppers are currently running through and depleting their savings. And demand is able to stay high in spite of high inflation and rising costs for the time being. So that could be a factor increasing demand on top of already limited supply. You have, larger issues like the retreat of globalization, I think, sanctions on trade due to geopolitical events. And then consider the fact that, supply chains are typically so finely tuned that an issue in any one of these areas can cause a kind of a cascade effect and cause further delays down the road. And I think we're seeing that now with Ukraine and with the lockdowns in China. So we could have some severe supply chain issues ahead of us for Prime Day, though I don't think it'll get as bad as 2020, and we'll keep a close eye on it as it occurs. And just kind of to wrap up some of our other data here that we're seeing so far this year, prices are up. Prices on e-commerce, prices on Amazon, rising 9% year over year, and margins are down. You can kind of see an uneven, but still very obvious decline in the gray line there in gross unit margins for vendors on Amazon, down to 27.6% in this most recent month. So a lot of headwinds, a lot of pressures facing Prime Day this year. That being said, Prime Day still sees a significant lift. These are the lifts that we saw in the past 2 years, and we're expecting still, at least a significant lift moving forward. I would say, if you want to say what the lift actually was for our most recent years, you can see that. Let's see, in 2020, it was probably north of, a 3x lift. So a plus 200%, or three times the normal amount of sales. Versus last year, it was more of a 2.4, a bit over double lift versus what you might see versus an average day. Now, both of these lines and all these lines that you see here and all these sorts of graphs that will go forward, they're indexed to that day on negative 15, which means that all the subsequent days are really compared to that first period there, all the way on the left-hand side of the graph on negative 15, which is, just over 2 weeks out from Prime Day. And that's important because actually roughly, the level of sales that a brand could expect to receive was actually about the same in 2020 versus 2021. But the reason the lift was smaller in 2021 was because, of course, Amazon grew during that period. So the lift was smaller relative to the higher baseline levels of Amazon, sales or revenue that occurred considering Amazon grew from 2021 to 2020. So the lift versus the kind of the baseline 2 weeks before Prime Day was actually smaller than it was. So that tells me that Prime Day is having, last year had less of an impact than it did in 2020 versus the baseline level of sales. Glance views were very high on Prime Day, right? Shoppers do engage Prime Day. That means maintaining they're looking at items. Visibility is very important. So maintaining conversion and content relevance is key to driving sales. And of course, there is still a lot of opportunity to be had, right? And actually, one other point here is that, so if we had a lift, OPS lift, order product sales lift of 3x roughly on 2020, 2.4x in 2021, we're still expecting, maybe we think sales lift could be more challenged this year for all the reasons we listed before, but still perhaps, at least a 2x lift. Heading into this Prime Day, shoppers are still shopping, and they're going to engage this holiday. Now, who benefits the most, right? And there's a clear hierarchy of categories from who benefits the most from Prime Day. So we can break out this data at a category level, and we see that and kind of on the right-hand side here, we've really listed it out numerically in terms of, versus 2 weeks before Prime Day, who saw the greatest lift on Prime Day itself. And you can see that home and kitchen by far saw the biggest lift. And a note about this data is that it excludes electronics. So, of course, electronics probably has a big lift. We don't really cover electronics at the moment. So we're just looking at categories other than electronics. Home and kitchen had a lift of, 500%, followed a distant second, patio, lawn, and garden, still a very big lift of over 200%. And then every other category still experiences a lift. Even on the lower end here, pet, grocery, consumables, you might not think, why are you buying groceries on Prime Day? Still had a 37% lift. So all categories can really benefit, though I would adjust your expectations, according to some of this data and your prior year data as well. So let's move on now. That was kind of the performance lift segment. We've gone over supply chain. We've gone over the performance lift segment. Here we're going to talk about discounts, the third segment here, right? And the interesting thing is that discount levels do not rise for Prime Day. Okay. And this is really interesting that we see. Now, how do we define discount levels? We're not here defining the number of items that are on sale. What we're defining is, of those items that are on some sort of promotion or sale, some sort of pricing promotion, what is the average amount off of the list price or the normal price that would be charged? How deep is the discount for those items that are on sale? Not how many items are on sale, but how deep is the discount for those items that are on sale? And what we see is that, last year around 2021, discounts were on average for items on sale about 30%, versus the list price. And that did not increase for Prime Day. You had a little bit of unevenness maybe, but on average, Prime Day, there were no significant increase in the level of discounts for Prime Day than there were on the surrounding days. In fact, because of when Prime Day occurred last year, which was June 21st through June 22nd, if you look at 2 weeks past that date, you actually run into July 4th, Independence Day, another retail selling period. And that's around positive 12 there on that graph, 12 days after June 21st and 22nd. And what you can actually see is that discounts did rise significantly for July 4th, right? So discounts are important for other holidays. And if you take a look way down the road, back to Cyber 5, discounts on Cyber 5 rose anywhere from 5, depending on the day, 5 to 20 percentage points across the whole Cyber 5 period, across multiple days, right? So discounts heavily being used across multiple days for Cyber 5, heavily being used by, even 20 percentage point rise for July 4th, just several days after Prime Day last year. But for Prime Day itself, discounts weren't heavily employed for either 2020 or 2021. And of course, that's very interesting. It means that brands don't see discounts as a way of, really leveraging the predominant way of leveraging shopper engagement, right? So is that true across categories? Well, almost. Home and kitchen did leverage discounts. And you can see here that spike during Prime Day in the yellow there, when we break it out by category, that they did use discounts. Only category to really, other than, electronics or other category listed here, to heavily use discounts. But even then, those discounts were eclipsed as we got close to July 4th last year. So even then, other holidays had more of a discount lift than Prime Day, even for the one category that did use it. And then actually, when you look at tools and home improvement and office products, so some other durable goods categories, discounts actually declined, right? It makes me wonder, perhaps there's not no discounting activity going on, but rather, I think what you're seeing is brands are saying, we're going to put a limited number, very small select number of items on sale, on discount, to drive traffic. And then we're actually maybe even potentially even raising the price of other items, or maybe cutting existing discounts that were happening before, cutting those off ahead of Prime Day to drive full price basket engagement, where shoppers are putting items to the basket that are actually at full price. And this tells me that discounting, select discounting, is a traffic driving strategy to the site and to the brand. And then once they're shopping the brand, or once they're shopping items similar to that, they're adding items into the cart that are full price. Okay, so visibility is king over discounts. So let's turn to our last topic here, which is retail media. And this is really the counterpoint to discounts. And that is that 2021 was a turning point for ad spend on Prime Day, right? Ad spend boosted ad spend rose a significant amount. It was double what it normally is for Prime Day 2020. For Prime Day 2021, it was about 4 times its normal amount. Compare that to Cyber 5 of that same year for 2021. Ad spend only increased about maybe 3 times its normal amount. So Prime Day under leverages discounts versus other holidays, but over leverages ad spend. Prime Day, and this is if you get nothing else from this session, it should be that the only thing you should take away, if you want to take away one thing, is that Prime Day is a retail holiday all about visibility and ad spend. It is replacing discounting as the investment vehicle of choice, honestly, across the board, really across the year, across most retail seasons, but especially in Prime Day. Prime Day is the forerunner of this trend. And we take a look, beyond just ad spend. We had cost per clicks also spike around Prime Day, typically spiking a few different times, maybe in between 1 to 2 weeks out. It spiked up ahead of Prime Day, and then spiking up just several days out. And actually right before Prime Day, in both instances, it declines. Cost per clicks declined in advance of Prime Day. And this actually is kind of analogous to another point I want to make, which is that shoppers, and you could see it when I showed you the OPS data, shoppers don't shop deals that intensely ahead of Prime Day, right? So don't overinvest in ad spend or discounts if you're trying to drive traffic. Don't overinvest in ad spend or discounts ahead of Prime Day, because you're unlikely to drive conversion. Now, ad spend can do a good job, and we do see a rise in ad spend. And you can see it here on the left-hand side as well. Ad spend does rise slightly. It's kind of dwarfed by those huge increases for Prime Day, but still, you can see that it rises, 30-ish%. 20 to 30-ish% about 8 days out from Prime Day last year. Ad spend does rise significantly, but I think that is more done to drive brand awareness of the products and the things that might be available on Prime Day, so that shoppers who are planning, even if they're not purchasing, maybe go into Prime Day thinking, you know what, I saw this item already. That's what I'm going to purchase. So it drives brand aware. Ad spend ahead of Prime Day drives brand awareness, and it should be a bit more limited compared to the huge spike in ad spend on Prime Day itself, which really can be very effective at driving conversion. I think visibility is king. That is one key takeaway from this presentation. So taking a look at ROAS and also a cost per click by category, ROAS actually just last year, ROAS, I would say, actually kind of maintained status quo for many categories last year. You saw a big spike in patio, lawn, and garden, and you saw a smaller but still significant spike versus the immediately preceding days in tools and home improvement and home and kitchen for ROAS for Prime Day 2021. But a lot of other categories, like you say, let's say office, health and personal care, grocery, beauty, they didn't see a spike in ROAS. That doesn't mean that ROAS, wasn't impressive. It's very impressive. It's just in maintenance mode, but that is still hugely positive, because when ad spend spikes 4 times its normal amount, if you're able to almost maintain your already hugely positive level of ROAS, that's just kind of normally the case. That's driving so much investment in retail media to begin with. Maintaining that while having 4x your times your normal spend does yield to massive returns in terms of absolute dollars, right? Because ROAS only measures efficiency, doesn't really measure incremental dollars added, which you can see with the huge spikes in OPS as well, right? Cost per click also tends to rise, directly around Prime Day as well. And we break that up by category here. That's a bit more consistent by category. Pretty much every category experienced a rise in cost per clicks for Prime Day. Health and personal care was really interesting because it had kind of a much more gradual rise in advance of Prime Day and a drop off after Prime Day, right? So if you're in health and personal care, expect cost per clicks to be rising basically starting right around now, and to be rising a little bit more gradually up through Prime Day, and then dropping off. If we're going by what happened last year. So moving forward to what we're seeing so far this year in 2022 on a monthly level, Ad spend, expect more of the same, right? For retail media, ad spend is increasing dramatically. For this most recent month that we have full data for, which was May 2022, ad spend is 60% higher than it was at this time last year. So despite ad spend's huge, inflection point and increase in 2021, ad spend is even higher right now, month over month or year over year for May. Where versus ROAS, also kind of what we're seeing. It's a little bit lower, but it's roughly the same as what we're seeing versus last year for this time this year. And consider that ROAS is hugely positive, especially for Commerce IQ customers. Again, this data is all taken from Commerce IQ customers, so many of them using they're all using our retail media tools, and they're achieving that ROAS of almost $5 for every dollar that they put in. So if you're a Commerce IQ customer, if you're maintaining that high level of ROAS, you boost your ad spend on Prime Day, you're going to see significant return, right? Now we take a look at ad spend by category, and basically what you see almost exactly mirrors OPS. The extremes, some of the extremes are even greater. Home and kitchen category ad spend is significantly even higher than what it was for OPS. But of course, the return is there. When OPS already rises so much, and your ROAS is that relatively high. Interestingly, despite the fact that OPS for groceries we saw rose 30+%, that was the one category where ad spend actually declined. Ad spend pulled back on grocery, even though OPS rose. So I wonder if there's actually an opportunity to further invest, if you're in grocery, to further invest in ad spend, because Prime Day is not a lost opportunity. There is an opportunity to drive your OPS in Prime Day, even if you're not a durable good. And then, the one takeaway here that's really key is visibility is king. Now, I know we've gone over about 20 minutes, but I do want to go over our final takeaways and predictions. You can screenshot this if you want right now. These are our advice for brands heading into Prime Day, right? So first, our predictions. The average sales lift for Prime Day 2022 will be less than 2021, but still expect, at least a kind of a 2x lift versus what we typically see, on non-Prime days, on days other than Prime Day, around that same time. Discounts similar to 2021, we don't see this trend disappearing anytime soon. Will not register significantly for Prime Day. If anything, ad spend will just become more and more to be the dominant vehicle of investment for brands. Shoppers, durable goods are always popular for Prime Day, of course. Discretionary goods, because that's that's typically things you're looking for deals on. But we do expect shoppers to shift some purchasing to personal care and essentials, as shoppers in general are shifting their care a bit more towards essentials and away from discretionary goods. Currently in this time due to macroeconomic factors. Out of stocks, considering what the huge spikes we're seeing in so far in 2022, just in this past month, we do expect them to rise from the prior year, but not hit 2020 levels. But also with higher out of stocks, at a time when OPS is rising and maybe a bit more chaos on the back end, also expect as a brand, expect a lot of shortages and chargebacks. And the more you can recover from shortages and chargebacks and kind of really hold on to the money that you've already earned from Amazon, the better your profitability will be. And maintaining profitability, of course, right now is key more than it ever has been in recent history. And of course, if you're interested, you can reach out to us afterwards. But of course, Commerce IQ, that's something we do, is we optimize your disputing invoices for shortages and chargebacks. We make that all automatic so that you don't have to spend a ton of time on it, and it increases your resolution rate. And then the final prediction here that we have is for ad spend. It'll be potentially even higher than 2021, but ROAS could be challenged if shoppers decide to spend less, right? So if we see kind of a smaller sales lift, that could challenge ROAS a little bit. The retail media is still key. In terms of our brand guidelines, what we think you should do, linking advertising spend to inventory levels is a great way to avoid out of stocks. You can go reach out to us afterwards if you find this interesting, but essentially using your retail media to orchestrate your supply chain. And what I mean by that is, if you pull back on ad spend on items that are about to go out of stock, you maybe even can prevent it from going out of stock, right? There's no point in promoting an item that will go out of stock anyway. That's just lost sales and lost dollars. Leveraging discounts to drive initial traffic, but then making sure you use retail media to drive, larger baskets. Of course, we talked about that a bit more extensively. Investing more in ad spend and optimizing your hourly bidding to yield especially high returns. Making your ad spend work for you in the most efficient way that it possibly can means tweaking it on an hourly basis. And that's something, of course, again, that Commerce IQ does, but it's something that is very valuable, especially on Prime Day. Maintaining high conversion rates to make high use of this period of high visibility is key. shoppers are looking at items, they're looking at all these items. If your content is relevant, if your if your item is relevant, if your content is on point, that's going to drive conversion. That's going to give you sales. And then finally, don't overinvest in either discounts or ad spend ahead of Prime Day to drive sales. That's really more about brand awareness. Shoppers really save their purchasing behavior for Prime Day itself. All right, I think that puts us about 25 minutes. But if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments or reach out after the fact. And it is really my pleasure to present to you. And just check us out. Typically we present on different topics to do with retail insights in e-commerce and the economy. Every week. I think next week we'll be taking a hiatus because it's more of a holiday week. July 4th, a lot of people will be out. But we will return after that, either the following week or maybe even the next week after that. Just check out the Commerce IQ LinkedIn page to see. To check out when that will be at the start of the week. That'll be announced. But thank you for tuning in, and I will speak with, or I will present to you. I will present to you in the coming weeks as well. Have a great rest of your week, and enjoy your day.